Hey folks, how y'all doing? Today we are at Edwards Crossing on the beautiful South Fork of the Yuba River, and I'm gonna take you on a little hike. I know it's been a while, but we're back on it, and yeah, so without further ado, let's head on down the trail and see what we can find. We're gonna be heading west from here, and following the northern exposure, which is on technically the southern side of the canyon here. And yeah, the Yuba River Canyon is floristically amazing. There are several rare plants and many interesting things. So yeah, let's see what we can find. So I thought it'd be kind of nice to do a bit of a crash course in some of the common species that you're going to find out here, and maybe a little bit about them if I have anything to share. One thing you'll notice in quite abundance are these tiny white flowers that are rising out of this basil rosette here. So there are the flowers. This is one of our native Heucheras, or commonly known as alum roots. This one is Heuchera Micrantha. And these flowers are absolutely gorgeous. If you get a chance to look at them up close under a hand lens or a microscope, they are just so beautiful and ornate, and it's kind of, when you walk past them quickly, you don't really get to appreciate them quite as much as they deserve. And let's see, we got some thimbleberries here. I hope everyone's familiar with thimbleberry. And down on the bottom, we have a little tiny Nemophila. This one is Nemophila heterophila. It rhymes, that's kind of nice. But this one is related to five spot, or the baby blue eyes that you might have planted in your garden with a wildflower mix. And it's quite common. You see it kind of growing in little openings in the forest, and even sometimes in deep shade. And we have several ferns over here. Of course, this is the Dryopteris arguta, the wood fern. And this one is a evergreen fern that grows in the dry areas in the understory of a forest. We have some Columbine. Columbine, pretty common garden plant, but this is our native one. Oh, here's one about to flower. Aquilegia is the genus on that. This little plant right here is called the trail plant, Adina, Colin, Bicolor. And one easy way to recognize this one, you look for those kind of arrow-shaped leaves and flip the leaf over. It will be bright white. And so they call it the trail plant because as you walk through a field of these, you'll kick over some of the leaves. They'll get stuck upside down like that, and they kind of mark your trail as you go. And let's see, what else? We have some shrubs here. This one is the Philadelphus Lewisia, the mock orange. Here's a one that's a little closer up, so you can see it's got these deciduous and opposite leaves, meaning they're on both sides of the stem, completely opposite of each other, and that's to contrast with being alternate, where they go side by side up the stem. We have another little fern. This one is about to go out for the year. This is called the fragile fern. They can actually get quite big, maybe like double that size. This one is not quite as big, and here, check out there the sori on the back, the sori being the reproductive structures that encase the spores. So this one is at full maturity. It's probably dropping spores as we speak, and yeah, setting up the next generation. We also have California bay, which if you ever think you have a bay and you're not quite sure, just tear a leaf a little bit and give it a smell, because that smell is absolutely intoxicating and distinctive, and you will know for sure you have a bay. The California bay is Umbularia californica. It has little white flowers at the end and creates a little nut that, well, I think they are edible actually. So maybe you'd like to try that out. I think Alicia Funk in her book Living Wild wrote about making nut clusters with them, so that's kind of interesting. And all right, on to the next spot. So as we move a bit out from the shaded canopy and we get on these mossy, more open rocks, you start to see different plant communities. Right here we have our broadleaf sedum, Sedum spathifolium, and you can see that it has pretty much wrapped up flowering. It has beautiful yellow flowers on these stalks here, and we'll just create a trail and send out new plants moving its way down the rocks. And yeah, it's a beautiful local native succulent, and though they're pretty common, you know, people like to poach these things, which is a real shame because they don't really survive well in cultivation. But he can come out to any of our local trails that have exposed rocks and see them in nature, and that's much, much better. Of course, we have our Pacific poison oak, our toxicodendron. So yeah, leaves of 3, let it be, but also to note, see how the terminal leaflet right there, the leaflet on the end, has a little petiole. It has a little stalk that separates it from the other 3 leaves. And so that's pretty distinctive of poison oak. So if you ever see like a strawberry, for instance, it lacks that, or there's another bush that's closely related to this called skunk bush, and that will have that terminal leaflet connected to the other leaves. And so just another little tip for identifying poison oak there. We also have more ferns in this area. Let's see if I can find some more. Ah, yes. We have Pentagram Triangularis, which is a really great scientific name because it contains pentagram and triangle. I don't know. They're kind of confused, I guess, of which shape best describes it. But this is also known as the goldback fern because if you turn it over, it's got sort of a golden tint to it. This one's a little bit immature, and as it matures and the spores on the back will get distinctly gold. And that shape, along with that wiry black stem there, if you can make it out, is pretty distinctive of the pentagramma, and they're really common in any of these rocky kind of areas. And yeah, let's walk a little bit. Maybe we can see some more. Oh, didn't have to walk far. We have a polypody fern. This one has pointed leaf tips, so I think this is the licorice fern, although you really have to dig it up to know for sure, and I'm not about to dig it up. So just know that these polypody ferns go summer dormant, so they are growing in, say, January, and then they die back to escape the summer heat. And yeah, it's one of our beautiful ferns. Oh, here's some old goldback fern. See this all curled up right here? And so you can see it has a little bit more of a golden hue to it when it's older. And what else? Some more beautiful Heuchera in full flower. Just a gorgeous plant. It looks so unassuming most of the year. And then this time of year, it sends up these enormous, you know, for its size, these enormous flower stalks with very tiny flowers. And yeah, just dots the hillsides in this area. This vining plant you probably have seen most places. These are Honeysuckles Lonicera species. I actually don't know very well how to tell the 2 species that we would have apart when there's no flowers. One has pink flowers and one has yellow flowers. So when they are flowering, they're pretty easy. Using a little bit of gestalt, considering of how hairy these are, I would say that this is the pink flowered one, which is also known as the hairy honeysuckle, but we're kind of in that zone where the 2 species overlap, and so I can't really be 100% sure about that. And I bet we'll find some more stuff if we just walk down a little bit further. Another fern. So this right here, I want you to notice at this angle how you can see that there's a space between each of those little pinnate fronds there. And so if you turn it up, it kind of looks a bit like it's all on one level, but when it's laying down like that, you can see there's actually quite a large amount of space between it. And that's one of the things that points to the fact that this is the narrow leaf sword fern, or Polysticum imbricans, as opposed to another sword fern we have, which is actually really common on the coast. It's called Polysticum munitum. And that one, all of these little fronds kind of lay in one plane, like they're all like that, instead of leaving a gap. And so that's one way to tell the difference. Also, the munitum tends to be much larger than this one. The narrow leaf sword fern can be quite small, and I'm going to be careful not to touch this poison oak, but get a load of those sori developing. They're not quite mature yet. They're still green. They will turn a dark color, but they just line the undersides of the pinnae there. All right, onward. So you never get too far away from plants. Just check out this moss community here. There's at least 2 species, one of which I know. That's this one right here. This is the Polysticum juniperium, or the juniper polysticum moss. These are the reproductive structures popping out of there. I'm not quite sure what the other one is, but they seem to be pretty common and intermingled. And you'll find the Polysticum fern pretty much growing on every surface that's not like a tree. So on rocks, on ground, in full shade in the forest, on these hot, dry, exposed areas. And the moss communities are really, really gorgeous, especially, you know, we had some rain last week, so things are a little bit plumped up. Normally, if it was dry in the summer, a lot of this would be kind of crispy, And in case you didn't know, California Native Plant Society has a bryophyte chapter, and that's the group that contains the mosses as well as some other little tiny plants that you often need a hand lens to look at and to identify. But the bryophyte chapter covers all of California, and it kind of focuses on these often overlooked mosses. And I just want to say one more thing about the moss here. So these are the female reproductive organs right here. So this is what's actually giving like birth to the spores. But then if you look over here, these little cups on the tips are the male male parts of the moss. And an interesting thing about this species of moss, it is dioecious. And what that means is it has separate male and female individual plants. So, you know, if you think about a typical flower and it has the stamens and stigma, and it has the female parts as well. I'm blanking right now. I'd probably need more coffee. They're contained on the same plant, but these ones and, you know, some other flowering plants actually have separate male and female individuals. And so I just thought that would be kind of neat to point out. Over here as well, we have a plant known as the lace lip fern. This one is very adapted to growing in harsh, hot, open areas, and has very beady kind of leaves on there, right? Very beady and sparsely hairy. We have another species that's very hairy, and that's a different species of the Myriopteris. And you can see there's the spores developing on the bottom there. Oh, pistil. That's the female part. It came to me. But yeah, let's keep moving down this rock face, because we have, of course, our canyon live oak, which has a golden hue or a whitish hue to the underside of the leaves, as opposed to being a light green, kind of the same color as the top, which distinguishes it from our interior live oak. But I've talked about that in other videos, so we'll keep moving. Now here's something really, really interesting and beautiful. Take a look at these flowers here. These beautiful candy-striped purple flowers arising on a stalk out of this basal rosette, where all of the leaflets are serrate. They almost look like saws or something. This is actually a ranked rare plant. This is Lewisia cantelowii, Cantelow's Lewisia, and it only grows in these river canyons here and is under threat from people poaching it and taking it home. But just look how, I mean, why wouldn't you want to take it home? It's kind of gorgeous, but at the same time, you want to leave the plants in their natural habitat, especially the rare plants. So yeah, what a treat to see Cantelow's Lewisia growing on these open rock faces amid this moss. It's also growing with, you know, more sedum and a lot of poison oak coming down here and encroaching. So I'm going to pause the video so I can photograph this one. I love it so much. And see you in the next clip. Hey, sister. This is a California sister butterfly. Decided to take a rest on my pack here. So yeah, not 2 seconds down the trail, and I found that someone had been pulling out some of those Lewisias. So there are jerks around who are, you know, slowly wrecking the flora around the area. But I'm gonna try not to concentrate on that and keep moving down. Oh, check out this beautiful Cladonia lichen right there, one of the pixie cup lichens. And yeah, here we have a pretty interesting plant I didn't expect to see. We have an arnica. So we got opposite heart-shaped-ish leaves. But if you notice, the flowers are entirely discoid. And so discoid, all right, let me back up. The composite flowers in the sunflower family, each one of these flower heads is actually comprised of many, many flowers. And so you have the discoid flowers in the center there, and you have the ray flowers, which are the like petals of, like, think of a daisy, for instance. Each one of those ray flowers is actually an individual flower. It's not just a petal for the one singular flower head. And so this one right here is really easy to identify when you see its kind of arnica shape, because it lacks those ray flowers. It is entirely discoid and is known as Arnica discoidea. The rayless arnica. And yeah, arnica is one of those plants that's also commonly poached because people think it's imbued with some sort of magical medicinal properties, and you know, maybe it is, but you can buy that stuff in the store. There's no reason to go out and take the plants. You can see there's only what, 3 individuals in this entire area. So you know, if you and 2 of your friends took one of these plants home to make medicine out of it, that's it. They're wiped out from this spot. We have no more arnica. Meanwhile, if you leave it, it will reseed. It will make lots more of them. And maybe it can get to the point where it's so abundant that harvesting it might be okay. You know, I typically don't shame people for harvesting like bay leaves because there's thousands, if not millions, of leaves on a bay tree. And if you take, you know, maybe you need 6 or 7 a year, you're not going to harm the tree, really. So it's, and also I should mention I'm in a state park, so taking anything is not allowed. It's illegal. So you actually, if you're going to harvest native plants, or any plant for that matter, you have to do so on your own property, or you have to do that on private property that you have permission to collect on. Not in our state parks, not in our wildlands, you know. I'm not opposed to foraging, but be ethical about it. And while we're here, I wanted to point out this beautiful plant. You can see it's got pea-like pods. It has pea-like leaves. It has pea-like flowers. This is our native pea. It's one of our native peas. It's the Sulfur Pee. It's a Lathyrus species. And Lathyrus, when their leaves are very young, they fold their leaves up rather than ball their leaves up. That's one way to tell Lathyrus. And if you really want to ID these kind of native peas, you got to pay attention to a couple things: the flower shape, you know, head on, the side view, how many leaflets are here, does it have tendrils like that? And then this part of the plant, right where the leaf and, oh here, I'll do this one. Right where the leaf, sorry, the stalk of the leaflets and the main stem meet, there's this little leaf that kind of subtends the area where they meet. That's called a stipule. And so the size and shape of that could be really important to identifying one of the native legumes. And this one, it doesn't have many flowers left on it because it's kind of late in the year, but it's really gorgeous. It has a cluster of flowers which kind of start off white and purple, and then as they mature, they turn to this pink color. And there used to be, they removed its distinction as a individual plant, but there used to be a rare subspecies of this called the dubious pea, and that one would have hairy leaves and foliage and stuff like that. But I think you know, the academics have just kind of rolled that back into the main species, and so now they don't consider that a subspecies. That's a whole other topic. We can maybe talk about it another time. But we're going to move away now from the open, exposed areas and move back into the forest. So let's see what we find down in here. Here, I just wanted to give you an idea of what the sulfur pea flowers look like when they're not so close to the end of their life. You can see the purpling and the white color on the newer flowers at the top, and then as they get older, they turn orange. Really gorgeous pea. One of my favorites. I grow it in my garden. It's one of my wife's favorite plants in the area too, so we're quite partial to this. Sulfur pea, Lathyrus sulphureus. So here we have our native buckeye. This is Aesculus californica. It is about to flower. It has these beautiful palmate leaves. It sends up a rather enormous flower stalk, which the native bees love. And yeah, it's a really beautiful plant. It's almost in bloom. This plant is kind of known for being a season ahead. So what I mean by that is it leaves out really early. It flowers kind of early for a tree, and then loses its leaves during the hot part of the summer. And that's a strategy because, you know, the plants will lose a lot of water through their leaves. And so if you don't have leaves, you're basically going dormant. It's a protective measure. And then it leaves out kind of in late January, February, when, you know, the oaks take another 2 months almost to start flowering. So I thought I'd point that out to you. Also, here's another mock orange, and you can see this one is also getting ready to flower. It has gorgeous 4-petaled white flowers that smell so wonderful and perfumey. Mock orange is not any bit related to actual oranges, I should mention. That tends to happen a lot with common names. And yeah, let's see, what else do we got down here? We have an Agaceris right here. This is another member of the sunflower family. And remember, I was talking about discoid flowers. Well, this is a form of flower called ligulate. And so what that means is it has no disc flowers. It is made of a cluster of ray flowers. So it's a cluster of those petals on the outside of a daisy, let's say. And so this one is, well, let's look at it. Sometimes these can hybridize and can be tricky, but I think, considering that these little teeth on the leaflet are pointing back, they're reflexed, I would call this Agaceris retorsa. There's other ones where the leaves, the teeth on the leaves rather, point forwards. That one would be Agaceris grandiflora, and we have another one where it's very, very, very small. It barely has any teeth, and that one's Agaceris heterophylla. If it's quite large, I mean, look, it's like got a 2-foot tall flower stalk, then it's not going to be heterophylla. But also these can hybridize, so who knows what's really happening here. This might even be a hybrid. I'm just not entirely sure. But yeah, Agaceris are pretty common. You'll find them from the lower elevations to the higher elevations and everywhere in between. We have, see, the Clarkia is here. Clarkia is about to flower with their dangling unopened flower buds. So don't really know what Clarkia we have here yet, but it'll be open soon enough. And right over here, we have a beautiful plant in the Plantaginaceae. This is Collinsia tinctora. It is the sticky Chinese houses. So it's got beautiful opposite leaves, these wonderful flowers. Yeah, Collinsias are your blue-eyed Marys as well, if you've ever seen that same kind of flower shape, and it's got white on the top 2 petals, and it's got blue on the bottom 2 petals. You're probably looking at one of the blue-eyed Marys, but that is the same genus. Ah, look at that Buckeye. That's really nice. And so here, the Agaceris, they call them mountain dandelions for obvious reasons, right? They look like the dandelion head there. Aha! We have some Clarkia that are flowering in the hotter, more exposed areas. And, you know, I'm not going to be able to tell you which one this is. I actually don't know my Clarkias too well. But maybe someone will want to comment and let me know what it is. I want to say it's the gracilis, Clarkia gracilis, the graceful Clarkia. But again, don't take my word for that one. I am not sure at all. But Clarkias are a really speciose group. There is so much diversity in there. And wow, what a beautiful spot. We have some Penstemon. Penstemon's another one I don't really know too well. This might be the foothill Penstemon. But you have to kind of dissect a flower, and the key is a little difficult to follow. And there's a caterpillar on there too. Yeah, beautiful Penstemons. They call them beard tongues because the pistil there will, or will not, for that matter, be kind of hairy, and so it kind of looks like it's a tongue sticking out, and then that is hairy gives rise to the beard tongue name. So, but yeah, check out this community. We have Clarkia, we have Penstemon. The insects are just loving it. And then this little guy right here is one of our jewel flowers. So this is a Streptanthus. This is related to mustards, to broccoli, things like that. It's in the Brassica family, and this specific one has very, very, very tiny flowers. They're probably not even coming out in the video. But I can tell you that this is Streptanthus tortuosus, or the mountain jewel flower. That's because of the flowers, which you can't see, are opened, and the petals are turning backwards. And the other common one we might see would have purple flowers, where the mouth of that is kind of closed up. That one is polygaloides. It tends to grow in serpentine areas. But yeah, mountain jewel flower, Clarkia, Penstemon, Agaceris. Got some goldback ferns in here. You know, things are hopping. The flowers are blooming. What a mix of colors and shapes and forms. So beautiful. So yeah, there's some Buckeye flowers. You can get a good look at them. Beautiful exserted flower parts, meaning they rise out of the end of the flower. I mean, look how big that is. It's like a foot long. They smell like lilacs to me. There's all sorts of little tiny bugs going crazy for them. Yeah, California Buckeye. get one in your yard. So those of you that keep a garden at home are probably familiar with this genus. It is Euphorbia. We commonly call them spurges. One of the common garden pests around here is the spotted spurge, which kind of trails along the ground, has little tiny leaves. Well, you'll be happy to know there's a native Euphorbia. This is Euphorbia crenulata. This is called Chinese caps. And I don't know much about the anatomy of these plants, but check out their flowers, which are very bizarre. They're little clawed discs and the little seeds developing below there. And yeah, they have this this kind of circular leaf. And you know, a lot of Euphorbia are really invasive. We have the egg leaf spurge, which is really invasive. We have the gopher spurge, is really invasive. But this one, you can let go wild. It's one of our natives. So yeah, Euphorbia crenulata, Chinese caps. And here's another plant you might think is a weed, but it's not. It's native. It has these white little sunflower ligulate flowers. Remember that term? Made up of a cluster of ray flowers. And on a long flower stalk, leading down to this basal rosette, which is quite hairy. In fact, look at the hairs on the stem there, right? So this one you will often see growing in on roadsides and trail sides, and it's quite common. And so you might think it's kind of dandelion-like or invasive, but nope, this is a native. It is just really good at spreading itself around because of its strategy of producing a bunch of wind-blown seeds, kind of like a dandelion. You know, it's not a bad strategy. It's just really unfortunate when it's a plant we don't want that has that really successful strategy. But yeah, so this is Heuchera. I forget the species name actually, but it's the white hawkweed. I think we have a yellow hawkweed as well. So it's really nice to see these flowering finally, because I've been watching them send up this stalk for the last couple weeks. Not this individual, but other ones. Like I said, it's pretty widespread. And yeah, weedy plants are pretty much just successful plants. But the problem is when we have moved them and they haven't naturally moved, then the other wildlife hasn't had a chance to adapt to it invading. You know, they haven't figured out how to feed on it, or, you know, there are no natural controls, so it just kind of takes over. And here's another one I probably won't be able to identify down to species, but we have a beautiful little, oh, gotta get it to focus. We got a beautiful larkspur here. It's in the buttercup family, believe it or not. And so got these highly divided palmate leaves, and it sends up a flower stalk. And you have these really distinctive, like, star-shaped flowers, but then if you look on the back, it's got like a spur sticking out. So that's how you can tell it's a larkspur. This might be Delphinium. Delphinium is the genus name. Delphinium patens, which is called the zigzag larkspur. But again, they're kind of tricky to work out, so don't quote me there. Yeah, Delphinium, larkspurs. What else do we got? Oh, look at that. There's the flowers starting to develop on one of those honeysuckles, one of the Lonicera species. And still, can't tell what color it's going to be. So we didn't get any further, but maybe we'll see further on down the trail. One with flowers open or flowers really, really developing. And that'd be a treat. They're considered an aggressive native because they will climb over everything. They might even take over certain areas. I know in certain areas of Empire Mine, for instance, there is just like tons of Lonicera, and it's one of those like perennial vines that you can chop back if you have it in your yard and it's taking over other things. You can chop it back. It's not going to hurt it. It's probably still going to come back out, but you don't have to feel bad about controlling something that's so aggressive. Here we have another native shrub, which has probably the softest leaves in California. This is our native hazelnut. So it's a Corylus cornuta. And yes, it does make edible hazelnuts, but I implore you not to collect and eat them because it really doesn't make a whole lot of seeds. You know, maybe one or two on a given plant will be viable, even though you might see dozens of them because they get eaten by insects. Once they hit the ground, the squirrels get at them. So, and they don't really produce enough to keep up with that kind of predatory action on their seeds. So please don't eat these ones. Let them grow. They can make stands in a forest if left be and they're not being impacted by rodents too much. They have this really gorgeous kind of sprawling habit where all the leaves are held out. And like I said, next time you see one and you're sure it's a hazelnut, go ahead and feel those leaves. It's actually pretty distinctive how fuzzy and soft they are. Really nice. Native hazelnut. So we're back in a shaded area, and we have a familiar sight. I hope most of you are familiar with this. This is the Columbine. It is fully open at this point. Beautiful red flowers. Look at the floral tubes on that. Look at all of those stamens sticking out there, and the like spurs coming off of the back. Beautiful, beautiful plant. If you can get this going in your garden, I highly recommend it. Even the leaves are really, really nice. And I do have to be kind of careful over here because there's quite a bit of poison oak. But just a little bit further down, we have another really interesting native plant. Look at those wide leaves, those circular leaves that are rising out of the ground. Down here at the bottom along the floor, you have the flower. That's the flower right there. And yeah, so it has the flowers at the base of the plant below the leaves, and it is actually not relying on quite a showy flower, but it's rather relying on the scent that its flowers produce to attract its pollinators, which are primarily flies. And a lot of plants, when they're pollinated by flies, or they're trying to attract flies to pollinate it, will use a smell that's very similar to like rotting flesh, right? And think about it, it makes sense. Like there's flies on carcasses and carrion and that kind of thing. And so it's one of those like carrion smelling plants. However, this one is known as wild ginger. Yes, and the roots have a ginger-like smell, although it is not closely related to the culinary ginger at all. And using this one can actually cause all sorts of health problems. So you can start to use it in small quantities, but it's really not recommended because, the dosage at which it becomes toxic is really, really low. So I think like the Native Americans used it as a spice here and there, but they probably weren't consuming it a whole bunch. And this one is Hartwig's wild ginger. We actually have two species, Hartwig's and lemons. And Hartwig's will have very hairy flowers that are quite big, actually, for an Asarum anyway. Asarum is being the genus. And then Lemonii has a smaller flower. It's a lot less hairy. And these are not the petals here, but the sepals. The sepals are reflex back like that, and they're quite long. They come to a long, tapered tip. So that's one way to tell the two apart. Hartwig's ginger also typically grows at like a lower elevation, and Lemonii doesn't really start picking up till 3,500, 4,000 feet or so. So yeah, that's our gingers. Oh, here's some berries on the poison oak, which they're not quite ready yet, but when they are mature, they are white with these black lines going down. They look like a Tim Burton pumpkin or something like that. And I think they're quite beautiful, actually. It's just a shame you can't pick one up and like mess around with it. Here's another native plant. This one is a monocot, so it's like more closely related to grasses and things like that than other flowering plants. And unfortunately, there's no flowers left on there. But this is one of our false Solomon seals. This one being Myanthemum racemosum, and another one we have is Myanthemum stellatum. And let's see, this one over here has some berries on it. So let's move over to that one and talk about it here. So, minor botany lesson. This flower structure here, if I can get the camera to stay. There we go. So you'll notice, even though the flowers are gone, there's multiple berries on each one of these little stalks coming off of the main flowering structure. That shape is called being a raceme. So that's where Myanthemum racemosum comes from. It is the Myanthemum that has a raceme flower structure. And the other one we have, stellatum, the star-flowered one, doesn't mention the flower shape, but that one has one flower and therefore one fruit on the tip of each one of these little flowering stalks, right? So that is called being a panicle when there's just one flower. A raceme has multiple flowers, a panicle has a single flower. And so Myanthemum racemosum, guess what? Has a raceme for a flower. And these berries are like a golden green color with speckles all over them. They're like little jewels. They are so pretty. So this is a really gorgeous plant. I mean, in its foliage, in its growth form, the flowers, the berries, just an all-around winner. Okay, this plant here is one of our native roses, and I learned a little something about our native roses this week, so I'm going to pass that knowledge on to you guys. But I can tell, even though there are no flowers left, that this is Rosa. Rosa is the genus of the roses. Rosa gymnicarpa. And they call it the bald hip rose. And they call it that because these sepals, which are still on the developing fruit, once that fruit has ripened, it will fall off. And most rose hips, think about even the roses in your gardens, they have the sepals still attached. They, they're the little claws that stick out of the end of the fruit there. And so if you couple the fact that I know that this is going to fall off, and then the flowering stalk right there, look how glandular that is. It is just covered in glands. And then you look, it has a sprawling kind of habit. It does have spines. See these like needle-like spines right there? That as you get further down the plant, get a lot more robust and crowded. That's the kind of thing that is pointing me to this being Rosa gymnicarpa. We have several native roses, and guess what? They hybridize. So sometimes they have intermediate characteristics. Sometimes they hybridize even with your garden roses. And so things can get really, really messy in the world of roses. But yeah, here, check it out. That's a stipule right there. I talked about stipules with the peas. Other plants have stipules as well. It's like a leafy appendage where the leaflet attaches to the main stem. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say that's Rosa gymnicarpa, one of our native wild roses. So just real quick, this is that Rosa gymnicarpa, and look how the sepals have fallen off. There's no sepals at the end of that. Here's some fruit that are a little bit further behind. They still have the sepals. And so that is the only rose in California where that will happen. Hence the name bald hip rose. That's the break in the key there, whether the sepals are deciduous or not. The same as deciduous leaves. Other parts of the plant can also be deciduous. So there you go. They're right at that stage where they're starting to lose them. Sepals attached, sepals not attached. Bald hip rose. Well, I'm lucky that I'm the kind of guy who's always looking at the ground up ahead and looking for plants and whatever else I can find, because look who's just covering the trail there. And from a distance, I don't see a rattle. I think that might be a gopher snake, so pretty harmless. But in any case, he's kind of blocking my progression, so I'm going to step up on him a little bit, try to scare him off the path. He's just laid across there. But yeah, always use situational awareness when you're on the trail, because you never know what you're going to find. There's definitely rattlesnakes around. I've stumbled on a few bears, some even recently, so yeah, all right, I'm gonna stop filming and actually try to scoot him. It's definitely a gopher snake. But yeah, just wanted to add this into the video there. Well, here's an interesting little shrub that a lot of people would confuse with one of our native live oaks, right? It does kind of look like the canyon live oak we showed. But this one has smaller leaves. And then if you look and you can find some of the fruit, look at the fruit right there. It's still developing, but soon that will be bright red. It grows kind of in a shrubbier form. I mean, that's clearly not an oak, right? If it doesn't have acorns, it has berries instead. This one is Rhamnus ilicifolia. It is a hollyleaf redberry, and it's much more closely related to like Ceanothus species than it is to oaks. And yeah, it just grows kind of small. Occasionally the shrubs will get 12 feet tall or something, not usually in an understory situation like this, but I have seen them quite large at places like the Black Swan Preserve down below Penn Valley. But yeah, just thought I'd point that one out because it's very likely to get confused. Here is, this was formerly a fritillaria. So one of those beautiful, probably the brown bells fritillaria, but this is the fruit developing on there. So really interesting fruit. And this is one of those plants that grows as a bulb and then sends up its flowering stalk and fruits really early and then dies back below the ground. Oh, there's another rose, but here's another native shrub we have. I want you to notice on the leaves here, if focus please. So yeah, see how the teeth go from the center of the side of the flower out to the tip, but there are no teeth on the back? That is very distinctive of a group of plants known as the service berries. And so these produce little edible berries. They can be even tree form. There's two species we have. It's the genus for these is Amelanchier. We have Utahensis and we have Alnifolia. I'm not going to be able to tell you which one this is. If I had to guess, I'd say it's Utahensis. But really what you're looking for is, are the leaf undersides and are the twigs hairy when there's fruit present? And, you know, looking around at this plant, there's no fruit present. So it could be either, technically, if you're following one of the keys. So I'm not going to try to make a guess, but yeah, I do know for sure that that is a serviceberry. And so look for those rounded leaves with no teeth near where the leaf meets the stem that eventually turn into quite crowded teeth as you get towards the tip of the leaf. Serviceberries. So here we have a pretty showy member of the Brassica family, another Brassica, just like those jewel flowers. And, you know, I'll reiterate, like a way to tell that you have a Brassica is you have 4 petals, and then you have 6 stamens, which you probably can't make out on there, but there's 4 long, which I think you can see there, and then 2 short down in the flower. So that's why botanists are always dissecting flowers, because you have to pay attention to little details like that. And so you can see it's actually quite tall. And these beautiful, gorgeous, standouty orange flowers. There's really nothing that looks like a wallflower. And, you know, this is the western wallflower, is what we call our wallflowers around here. But in the coastal areas, all of these orange flowered wallflowers have been kind of split up into different species and with little minute differences, and a lot of them are considered rare. And I suspect, this is my pet theory, by the way, that our wallflowers are as speciose. Like, we have many species of wallflowers that all kind of look alike with minute differences depending on environmental and, you know, what canyon they might be growing in, whether they're at higher elevations or lower elevations, that kind of thing. And just nobody's studied them yet, and nobody's teased out those differences. So yeah, if anyone's looking for a doctorate, there's your, you could tease out some new Sierran wallflower species. But you know, for my purposes, I just like to stop and admire them. I think they're quite pretty. So thanks to our relatively recent rains, a lot of these creeks are still running, which is really cool. And I want to point up there, which I can't reach to, but that big shrubby thing in the middle of the water, that is Aurelia. That is called elk clover or California spikenard. It is a really interesting plant. It grows to 6-7 feet in a season. It has really enormous leaves, if you can make it out up there. And then it just dies back below the ground and pops up the next year. So it invests a lot of energy into its growth each season. And, you know, since we're near the water, we have some water-loving plants. We have a beautiful little plant in the saxifrage family. This is Boykinia. Brook foam. So yeah, these white flowers and kind of leaves, they almost remind me a bit of like Indian rhubarb, and that is because they are somewhat closely related. Beautiful little white flowers. And let's see, anything else over here? Oh, we have a bedstraw, a little gallium. That might be Gallium triflorum because of the 6 leaflets that are quite wide, but gallium are a little tricky to tease out, so I'm not 100% sure. And yeah, little nice little wet area here. Got more Nemophila growing up in these areas as well. More stone crop. These ones are quite big. And yeah, so these we're seeing a lot of the same plants, more Heuchera, more polypody ferns, because, you know, this is the environment that they like. They like these wet, kind of shaded, mossy slopes. You know, they like water, but they don't like water for too long. They like a little bit of drainage. Oh, look at that! There we have some kind of liverwort. So that's another bryophyte, like these mosses, but you can see it's kind of got, it almost looks like a lichen or something. It has, that's what's called the thallus. And so it's, you know, a little leafy bit that lays along the ground. There's some more of it. They grow in wet areas as well and kind of shrivel up by the time it gets too hot out. Here's one you might see pretty commonly. Just put my hand in the spider web. This is the very leaf Colomia. So little pink flowers, little tiny plant, and very leaf, because see how many different leaf shapes on one single plant? So I like when a common name is descriptive like that. Very leaf Colomia. Beautiful little scene here. Okay, we are back, and we are watching a moth, actually. That was a moth. It looked like a bee, but it was a moth. And it's one of those bee mimic moths. But I want to talk a little bit about our native iris here. This is Iris Hartwigii, Hartwig's iris. And we actually have two irises which look almost exactly the same. And I can tell that this is Hartwigii because you can see below the flower, there's that swollen four-chambered ovary there. So see that? That's the ovary. And it's immediately below the flower. And on our other one, which is Iris macrosiphon, there would be a slender tube, and that ovary would be down in the sheath over here. And that's the leaves enclosing the stem here. And so an easy way to tell those two apart, if you're like posting irises on, say, like iNaturalist, or you want to get an ID from us in our Redbud forum, please include a side shot of the iris. It will help immensely. And you'll notice that little ant right there, I believe, and I've not confirmed this, but I believe there are nectaries on the outside of the flowers, because anytime I see one of our native irises, it has ants on it. And I think it's offering the ants a little bit of sweet nectar there so that they protect the flower from aphids, or not from aphids, because they probably keep the aphids around, but from other insects in general. And so yeah, there's always ants on these irises. So watch with putting your hand in there or anything like that. But let's head on down the trail here, because we're down by the river again. Well, relatively close to the river, maybe 50 feet up. And the habitat is about to open up from the forest again. And so I am pretty sure we are going to see some interesting stuff along these sort of more open areas. So first of all, we have a woolly sunflower. This is Areophyllum linatum probably. And you'll notice this one is also in the sunflower family. And it has both discoid flowers in the center there. See how the little flowers are opened up in the center even? And then it has ray flowers as well, which gives it that kind of traditional daisy look to it. And it's growing right here next to another jewel flower, and check out the seeds on those. These like dangling seeds. There's a specialized name for this kind of seed. I think it's like silk or silky or something like that with a Q, but I can't remember exactly. But another jewel flower, that's going to be really common kind of out here in these open exposed areas. And we certainly have more Clarkia, we have more Heuchera. What else? Oh, these are a little bit too far gone. These were Indian pinks. Really nice red flowers. Really striking when they're in full flower. But they're no longer, they're senescent. So, you know, senescent meaning that they are done flowering and fruiting for the year. And here we have a gorgeous monkey flower. This is the artist formerly known as Mimulus. This is now in Diplacus. They split up the Mimulus based on whether this tube here is longer or shorter than the attachment point, which is called a pedicel here. This is a better example. See that little stalk that the flower is on? And it's quite short, and then the tube is quite long. That's what's placing this in Diplacus. And so this is Diplacus grandifloris. Big old orange flowers, really ornate. Love this plant. You can see it in the Yuba River Canyon in most places, and it is just about wrapping up its flowering for the year. This was probably 3 weeks ago. These were in full glory and bloom. But I mean, they're still pretty glorious. Look how big those flowers are. Orange bush monkey flower, and it's quite sticky. They call it sticky bush monkey flower. Well, let's see what else we have. Here is a an opening of Uco. So another bulb plant. See that really long scape right there? It's going into a bulb under the ground. And let's see, when you're looking at these Ucos, you have to examine the flowers pretty closely. So what you're looking for is this piece right here in the center of the flower, these little erect tips. Those are called staminodes. And so you want to take note, and you want to see if they have a fork in them or if they are rounded. And this one is rounded, so this makes this a Dicolostoma multiflorum. or the round-tooth uco, the other one being Dicolosoma congestum, the fork-tooth uco, and these are somewhat closely related to the blue dicks, which actually have now been moved into a different genus, so they're no longer related. But pay attention to how, see how the flowers are pinched in the middle there? They have like an hourglassy shape to it, like a waist to them. That's pretty diagnostic and will help you separate it from some of the other more closely related plants in this family, which I think is now like Themidaceae or something like that. I might be leaving out a letter there. But yeah, see the bulbs have just wedged their way in, heading, oop, you can't see anything. Going all the way up this little cliffside. You got the Dicolostoma multiflorum. Jewel flowers with their hanging seed pods. Let's see if I can see this crushing too much stuff. We have a native clover. I don't know, can you make that out? Native clover here. It's almost done flowering for the year, but these really like linear leaves and the tall purple flowers makes me think that this is the tomcat clover, which I believe is Trifolium wildenovii. Yeah, there's just a couple of them. They're pretty widespread. You can see them on Table Mountain, down in like Penn Valley. Wow, look at all that jewel flower down there. Jewel flower just loves these hot, rocky areas, and you know, they will grow on like serpentine even, which repels most plants. Nice exposed rocky area in the canyon. Got gray pines growing over there. A lot different than the ponderosas that we were just walking under. Got more monkey flower. More Clarkias. Ah, here we go. I had mentioned the mock orange, and this one, because of the exposure, because it's not in the understory, is currently flowering. So what a gorgeous, gorgeous little tree, small tree, shrub. And the light's kind of washing out the flowers, but they have these beautiful four-petaled, really, really wonderfully smelling flowers. So yeah, that's the mock orange in flower. It's pretty cool to see. We're coming up on another dry adapted shrub. This one's in the rose family, believe it or not. It's related to like roses, but also, you know, apples and plums and all that kind of stuff is in the rose family. This is a Cercocarpus betuloides. This is the birch leaf mountain mahogany. Grows in really hot, dry areas, and you can see these little spikes on here are the seeds that are developing, and they will eventually become very hairy. This kind of seed is called an achene. And you can see this one's starting to get hairy right here. Oh, no, you can't see. Well, I can't get it to focus on such a small item, but these plants, when they are in the middle of summer and they are fully covered in seeds, are absolutely gorgeous to see. They just look like these fuzzy tendrils coming off of the plant. And if you catch it at like sunrise or sunset with the sun behind it, it is stunningly beautiful. One of my favorite sights in the plant kingdom in this area. Check out that monkey flower. It's getting going in that little sheltered rock crack there. And, you know, little fern community. Got the polypody fern, narrow-leaf sword fern, the lace lip fern, the goldback fern, all growing in them, you know, what, 10 square feet or something. All right, well, here is something you don't see every day. This actually looks a lot like the birchleaf mountain mahogany we were seeing, and it's also in the rose family, but the leaf shape is a little bit different, and certainly the flowers are a lot different, although it's not quite flowering yet. Oh, it is. There's little, very tiny flowers, which I cannot get to focus. I know that's a running theme in these videos, and I'm apologizing if I sound like a broken record, but look, little tiny flowers. This right here is, it's called ocean spray, or Holodiscus discolor, and it's really, you know, I say you don't see it every day. Well, depending on where you live, you might actually, but in this area, it is exceedingly rare. You'll see this like growing in the granites, another 2,500 feet up, or you'll see this like on the coast pretty commonly. But in this area, in the Yuba River Canyon, somehow, like, those populations must have been connected at some point, and this is just a relic plant just hanging on in here. So it's pretty cool to see. Here's a better shot of the flowers. Pretty different from the birchleaf mountain mahogany. Kind of stood out to me like that. Yeah, ocean spray, Holodiscus, very cool. Just got jewel flower everywhere. See, and this is what the jewel flower looks like when it's first getting going. These are perennial species, so this is what it'll look like for like the first year or two, and then eventually it starts putting out flowers. And a byproduct of flowers is seeds. That California Bay looking kind of pallid. There's the river down below. The same Heuchera species, which in the full sun rather than the understory has turned purple, probably to protect its tissues from the harshness of the UV rays. And here is another weirdo. Okay, this right here is another fern, but you'll notice it has two different shaped fronds. This is the American parsley fern. This one is the infertile fern, which collects energy from the sun, and eventually it will send out a different specialized fern, the fertile fern here. And on the undersides of that, and these little rolled up fronds here, is where the spores are born. So you actually have two different fern shapes coming from the one individual plant. And oh, look at that. Look at those liverworts. That looks like it might be Asterella because of the purple wine-colored edges to the thallus there. But yeah, back to the parsley fern. Named such because, you know, leaflets kind of look like parsley. And this is another one you don't see down here. You know, it grows at higher elevations. But for whatever reason, in this little rock, and I'm not rock crack, you're seeing it. It's hanging on here. So that's pretty amazing. Usually you don't see this till like 5,000 feet or something, and we're something like 2,500 feet down in this canyon. So really fascinating spot. Oh, here there are a couple more hanging on here, just in this let's see, western exposure, growing in the rock cracks. See, they're all sending out their two different style fronds rather. Really cool spot. But I think that with that, we're gonna call it a day here. I probably need more coffee in my system because I'm starting to really mess up my words. But yeah, so again, my name's Shane Hanofee. This is another installment of the Redbud virtual hikes, this time along the southern Yuba River, headed out from Edwards Crossing. And I hope you'll, like the video, maybe subscribe, check us out on Instagram or our Facebook page, join our forum. You can, there's a lot of really knowledgeable people and community members who can help you identify a plant that you'd like to know, or can help you with gardening with natives, or really any native plant topic that you want to just share with your local community. And yeah, I hope you will join us. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.